Hello and welcome to The Real Talk. Today we have Vernon BC resident Phoebe, who is going to share her story about scoliosis, from being diagnosed when she was 12 all the way up until adulthood. Let's get into it. Welcome, Phoebe.
Thank you. I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm so excited to have you. So your journey with scoliosis started when you were only 12.
Mm-hmm.
Can you take us back to that time and share how it was like when you first discovered that something wasn't quite right?
It all actually started when I would be walking home from school, elementary school, and I'd be walking on the side of my foot. And it was causing like a lot of pain in my legs, up and through my hips. No one could really understand why I was doing it. My mom is an OT, so an occupational therapist, and she was kind of like, something's not right. So they booked me in for a physio appointment with someone who took a look at my hips and noticed that they were oddly shapen. One was higher than the other. So she started working on my hips. She would pull on my hips. She would give me all these exercises for my hips, but it wasn't working.
And was it painful to have it worked on, or?
Uncomfortable. I wouldn't say painful. I would say it's uncomfortable because someone's just pulling on your leg, basically. But yeah, she eventually, I went for a few sessions and nothing was happening. She was still noticing one hip was higher than the other. And she had a sports physio come in. He just was working in the office that day. And he's like, hey, can you just come take a look at Phoebe? And, me and him had maybe a 2-minute conversation. He just went, bend forward. And I did. And he took his fingers, and my mom was there, and she still remembers it to this day, that his fingers literally just went in an S shape up my back. And he's like, you've got scoliosis.
Holy, so you didn't, that's basically how you're diagnosed with it, right? Yeah.
It was visible. Like, you could see it if I stood, of course we don't know what to look for. Mm-hmm. But as soon as I started standing straight, you could visibly see that my spine was twisted.
Right. And there was no other signs before that?
None that we noticed anyways. It all just came from me just walking funny.
So the next step for you was being referred to a children's hospital.
Basically, yeah. I had x-rays done. And since I was so young at the time, they were like, we're not going to send you to a regular hospital. I was sent down to a specialty hospital down in Vancouver, where they're more equipped for it. And again, lots more x-rays, MRIs, all these scans were done. And they basically told me that, yeah, you need to have surgery done. Your spine's too curved to have a brace.
Oh, wow. With some people, they can have a brace and it's okay.
I don't know the exact degrees of curves, but if you have a lower degree curve, it can be fixed with a brace.
Oh, interesting.
But it just, unfortunately, mine was just too severe to have it. Mm-hmm. So then basically from there, I was just put on a waiting list. And
how long was the wait?
It was a 2-year wait.
Wow.
Yeah.
Holy. And was it ever pushed?
Surprisingly not. That one was definitely more like, we need to get her done. But they have to do it after you've gone through puberty and you've stopped growing.
Right.
So that was my thing, because once you have the spinal fusion done, you can't grow anymore. So they had to we have to make sure you have fully stopped growing, and then we can go through with it.
Did you understand the severity of what you were going through?
I think at the time, no, because I was 12 when I was diagnosed, and it was 14 when I actually had the initial surgery done. To me, I just heard you don't have a choice, really. It's either get the surgery done or be deformed, basically, and deal with it that way. And so my parents were the ones that really just went, she's got to do it. Right. So we went ahead and did it.
And when you got referred to the hospital in Vancouver, was that when it just became a little bit more real for you?
Yeah, I definitely got more real as the time ticked by. The closer I got, and I had to do more of the testing, because they had to make sure your lungs are good. You have to do all these different types of exams before you go in for surgery. So it was sort of at that point that I was like, okay, something's going to happen here. Yeah. My life's going to be changed for basically forever at this point.
Right. And I mean, I'm sure that no other kids in your friend group, in your school, were going through the same thing.
No, I wouldn't say so. I didn't meet another person with scoliosis till many, many, many years after. Wow. like after high school and everything.
So while you were on the wait list for surgery, what did a day in the life kind of look like? Were there things that you could and couldn't do?
My life was mainly quite similar to everyone else's in that sense, other than the fact that I couldn't really do sports because when your spine curves, a lot of your other parts of your body curve with it. So my rib cage had twisted, all my muscles were twisted. So doing strenuous exercising and physical sports was just, it was either too painful, too uncomfortable, or my body just couldn't do it.
So time goes by, the clock is ticking. It's 2 years and you get the call.
Yeah. We literally, we knew what day it was coming because they give you a call beforehand, being like, this is the date it's going to be. So me and my mom and my dad, and we packed up, we boarded a friend's van. We took all the back seats out of the van, threw mattresses down and everything because we had to figure out how to get me home before I even left. So we packed all that. I even brought my cat with me because I needed comfort.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't think we rented a house, but we stayed at someone's house. I think it was a coworker of my parents. So we get down there, we get to Vancouver. It's now the day before. And when you go for surgery, you have to stop eating at a certain amount of time. So we ate quite a bit of yummy junk food beforehand because I'm 14. I wanted comfort food.
I was just going to say, like, that's of course what you remember is like doing all these things that you never were allowed to do.
Nothing was really changing. We ended up I had to have a special shower where I fully they disinfect you and everything like that. So that was when my mom finally got her last sort of before photo. And she, in it, you can really see how my spine is just so curved. It was crazy. And then, night of the surgery, I was nervous because that's sort of when it was really starting to kick in. It was like, oh my gosh, tomorrow is the day. So we arrived at the hospital for about 6 a.m. And then they put you through, they added all these electrodes to my head, which they literally had to glue in. They give you the relaxing kind of drug to stop you from being anxious and whatnot. And, I spent a few hours there while they were prepping. It's kind of boring, but that was just sort of the leading up to it. And then, my dad walked me down into the surgical room and, they had all their big screens up. They had x-rays up already. They had all these tools set out. And I'm sitting there and I'm now starting to be really going, okay, this is it. This is the moment. And then, they give you the anesthesia and I was out.
So the surgery was a success and you woke up.
Yeah. The surgery took about 8 hours. I was out cold for 8 hours. My parents were the ones that had to do all the waiting and, the anxiety of it all because I was asleep. And apparently when they very first saw me and they wheeled me out into the recovery room, I was swollen. My whole face, because I was laying face down on something for 8 hours. So they were utterly shocked because they're like, oh my gosh, her face is completely swollen. My eyes were swollen shut, my cheeks. And then I initially wake up because I woke up once and then immediately went back to sleep because anesthesia does that to you. It just makes you feel so groggy. And I remember waking up and I just said, I did it. Aww. I did it. And I remember my mom being like, heck yeah, you did. You did it. It all kind of just went from there. There's so much that the doctors and nurses had to do. They had to make sure I could wiggle my toes. Then let's get her sitting up. So I remember sitting upright out of on the edge of the bed 2 hours after having spinal surgery done. And I was walking the next day. It was so crazy, but they had to make sure that everything was in working order because they were working so closely with my spinal cord. And I had to relearn how to walk, relearn how to do stairs. Because when you were curved, and even though you couldn't really see it unless you knew me, my center of gravity was off. When I originally stood up, they're like, you're gonna feel dizzy because your center of gravity is where it should be. So I remember being really dizzy. Walking felt like I had concrete boots on. It was really, really weird trying, having to relearn the basic things that I'd known for 14 years.
So how long were you down in Vancouver, having these different appointments and stuff?
I was only in hospital for a week. Okay. After all that, they checked to make sure there was no infections. They gave you the medications, and then they basically were just like, yeah, you're on your way home. But I had to do follow-up appointments. I think it was every 2 months to every 6 months to once a year.
Back down in Vancouver. Yeah. Oh wow. So it's not just a lot for you, it's a lot for your family.
Oh, yeah, they had to sacrifice and commit a lot of time and whatnot to helping me with this.
Yeah, absolutely. So coming home, you had mattresses in the back of the van.
Brutal, the drive home. I remember because we first had to get me from the hospital to the house we were staying at. So we stayed there for about, I think, a few hours. And I remember trying to sit upright in the chair was excruciating. I remember crying on the entire drive home. Anytime there was a speed bump that my body was jostled, it just sent a spike of pain throughout my body. So we get back to this house. The parents are loading up the vehicle. They're loading up the cat. They get it all comfortable. And, I took my meds and I just laid in the back seat or on the floor on a mattress for 5 hours until we got home. And then I remember trying to walk up the stairs, my mom's being very much like, okay, one step at a time. And I've got my dad's blood in me. So I'm going, I need to just get up these stairs. Yeah. But yeah, I got on the couch and I was off from school for a month, just recovering on my own, basically. There was nothing really anyone else could do.
Right. And what did that mean for school for you and stuff?
A lot of the teachers gave me like a break almost. I didn't really miss it. I kept up with as much as I could, but they kind of gave me more of the projects that would count a lot towards my grades. Like just regular math homework or socials homework. They're like, we're not gonna, you're just coming off spinal surgery. But if there was like a big project that had something to do with our grade, then they're like, try and get this done. My photography class actually was the one that I got extra time to do everything. So I could come in on lunches or breaks and do all that stuff. So it really didn't affect my schooling too much.
Despite the surgery, you were still experiencing a lot of pain, even though you were technically healed.
Yeah. A lot of it also came from just the fact that my body was used to being twisted. So there was a lot of, now that my spine was fused straight, a lot of the muscles still didn't know what to do. There was still that sort of aspect to it. So there was always ongoing just muscle pain and stiffness and joint issues. But then there was just something to me that just never felt right. Like I was, there'd be days where I wouldn't be able to move, or I'd be leaning on a wall because I couldn't stand. And I remember talking to my doctor about it, and he was just like, yeah, no, it's just how it is. Like your body will eventually get used to it, and so forth and so forth. So that went on for quite a few years. And then I got in touch with my specialist, my surgeon again, and I was like, I need to talk to you. Like I need to, even if there's nothing wrong, I still just need to talk to you. And I told him about the kind of severe pain I was getting, the nerve pain, and he just went, no, that's not right. Something is not right. You should not be in this amount of pain. That's 3 years later, basically. Mm-hmm. They put me through a bone scan, which was kind of cool because I got a little certificate that said I was radioactive for a day. So I thought that was cool, being like 15, 16 years old. But it turned out I'd actually snapped one of my screws, completely snapped it off from the bone. And my surgeon I remember him just looking at me and then looking at me, then looking back at the x-ray and looking at me going, what?
I take that's not a very common thing.
No, it's not. It's not something that commonly happens. So he basically said to me, he's like, you're going to have another surgery.
Oh, wow.
We have to go in and fix this. Because in the x-ray, you could clearly see like your vertebrae, and then a little bit down was the head of the screw. Like it had fully detached, basically. So then I was scheduled for another surgery. But thankfully, this one didn't have nearly as long of a wait. But it wasn't one where they're like, we'll book you ahead of time. It was when you get the call, you get the call. Yeah. So I got my call 3 days after grad.
Yeah. Here you are, just like ready to start your life.
And here I am being like, oh, great. Yeah. Thankfully, my parents were working in Vancouver and Langley at the time, and they had just left to head down there. So I called them, I'm like, you guys got to come back. and pick me up and take me. We're getting surgery done. And that one, again, I didn't really like have anxiety towards it because, again, it was just something I had to do. You know, like it's either deal with the pain you're in or go through something else.
That will hopefully make your life better.
Exactly. So kind of the similar leading ups to it. You know, you've got to eat certain, or you've got to stop eating at a certain time, be at the hospital so they can do all their prep work on you. All of that was the same. And I was told that this was going to be a maybe 2-hour surgery and I'd be out by the end of the day.
Like day surgery.
Basically,
yeah.
Right? Which is mind-blowing to think about when it comes to the spine. Turns out it ended up being maybe a 6-hour surgery, maybe more. And I was actually in hospital for a week.
So it was a 6-hour surgery.
Yeah, it ended up being a lot longer than they had anticipated due to the fact that when they opened me up,
got in there, yeah.
They realized that the screw had broken flush to the bone.
Oh.
So there was literally nothing for them to grab onto and twist out. So they tried to do as minimal damage as possible to the surrounding areas and just nothing was working. So they ended up having to drill around the broken part of the screw and then untwist it.
So, I mean, for the people watching and listening, drilled around the bone. Like, you have to, like...
Yeah, they drilled into my vertebrae.
Yeah, I'm sure that there's probably photos and videos online, but, like, you're just saying, oh, they're drilling in, and I'm like, oh, my God. Like, they're in there going around this. Yeah.
So then eventually they got the new screw in, and then they had to go in and patch up the hole, basically. So they basically did the same thing as what they did to fuse it, which is they take bone dust and turn it into a paste. And then they fill in the gaps that were either drilled into or the bits they were fusing. And as it heals and hardens, it becomes bone.
I didn't know that either.
Yeah,
the more you know.
Really cool procedure that they have to do. Yeah. But then they noticed that there was another screw loose, so they had to go in and they fixed that. Then they noticed that some of the vertebrae hadn't actually fused, so there's still movement. So then they had to refuse that area with some extra bone dust, and it just ended up being a way longer procedure than they had anticipated.
Right, and there was complications right away when you woke up, right?
It was, I remember just being in agony and just screaming. And my mom trying to hold me, and I'm just bawling and screaming, and everyone was looking at me going like, we don't know what's going on. We don't know why she's feeling like this. Right. But I could essentially, basically, to me, I felt every single thing that they did. I felt the incisions. I felt the drilling, even though your bone doesn't have, but you know, it's what it felt like. Yeah. I felt the stitch. I could feel
it's trauma to your body. Yeah. Your body knows that it just went through something. Yeah.
And I just remember for days I was laying on my side because I could not lay on my back, that I actually started getting like bruising from being on my side long because 24 hours of a day I couldn't lay on my back. And I wasn't eating, I was vomiting, and it was just horrendous. And I remember, and to this day my mom still calls her my guardian angel, was a nurse who was covering for someone who's in the intensive care unit. Mm-hmm. And she took one look at me and went, you should be in my ward, my unit, not in this one. So she knew something wasn't right. And she took a look at the records, and my pain, like the morphine they were giving me, wasn't enough for what they had done. Basically, they hadn't switched it. And she's like, oh my gosh, no wonder you're in such pain. So she immediately goes out and tries to hunt down the surgeon because she needs his approval before he starts messing with my drugs. And I remember her finally coming back being like, we've been finally given the okay to give you some more. It's going to take a little bit to kick in, but I'm also going to give you some anti-nausea medication to help you sleep too.
Great.
To basically just put you out till it kicks in. And it's the stuff that they give to chemo patients. Wow. Like it's strong stuff. But she's like, we need to knock you out, basically. So yeah, they did that. I woke up and I was in what I guess you could call the normal amount of pain and discomfort that I should have been in. But from there, I was allowed to go home. But it took about a week before they figured it out.
Pain management is a huge part of your life.
It's an everyday part of my life. I constantly always have to have something in me, basically, to help, whether that's Tylenol or Advil, anything like that. Seeing physiotherapists, massage therapists, all that is a battle in my life because I constantly need it.
And you've more so started, what was it, acupuncture?
Yes,
Yeah.
I get acupuncture and cupping done.
Yeah.
I love it.
And it helps on your incision because you have pain with your incision too.
Yeah, I have a lot of scar tissue, and a lot of people don't realize that scar tissue buildup actually can create its own pain. So my scar, because it's been cut into so many times, has a lot of scar tissue damage to it. It's quite thick. So my acupuncturist, she does needling inside onto the needle or onto the incision, and she can visibly see the incision rise and then fall. Rise and then fall, because it's actually releasing some of its tightness that it has in it. It's really, really cool.
Yeah. So does your body still have some type of like reaction to feeling like it's twisted still, or?
That's always, to me, yes. I still occasionally find myself standing a little twisted. But I had what they called idiopathic adolescent scoliosis. So they didn't actually know what caused it.
Right.
They just assumed that when I hit puberty, one half of me grew faster than the other.
Huh.
But the way my mother kind of describes it to me is there's still a force in your body that's trying to twist you. You just now have metal and a few spines stopping it from doing that. So there is constantly almost like an internal battle with my own body. Yeah.
So in 2022, you started experiencing some really severe pain again.
I was noticing that it was hard to do a lot of things again. Walking, sitting, standing, laying down. And I remember going to my doctor and just, again, he needed to refer me to someone else. I was referred to an orthopedic surgeon in town. He took a look at the x-rays and was like, you broke a rod. You snapped one of your rods in half, basically. And he couldn't give me an explanation as to why or how that happened, just that it did. And we're talking about now 10 years since my original surgery. And then he looked at my thoracic x-rays and noticed that I call them anchor hooks. They're basically just where the rod starts and comes down. They had come out of the bone. So they were basically just rubbing around on the inside of my body without having any purpose at that point, because they were out of the bone. They were serving no purpose but causing pain. And he basically said, I need to refer you to a specialist down in Vancouver. He does adult spinal injuries and quality of life. And he was an absolutely fantastic doctor. Went down to see him. The initial consultation was basically just saying that what he's going to have to do is we're going to have to cut the broken rod out. Not the whole thing, just from where it snapped and down, basically. And same for the anchor hooks, was basically cut them and just remove them out, because it's not serving any purpose anymore.
Right.
And technically, because my spine has been fused for so many years, the rods really aren't doing anything. Right? Like the bone is solidified at this point. So I, agreed, obviously, and I was put on, I guess you could call it a wait list, but it's basically, they'll let you know a rough estimate, but the date could change because it's a bigger hospital, more emergencies. My date got pushed a few times, but it finally came around for March 31st. We went in, we did the prep work, we did all the disinfecting and the tests that you need to get done, and I was wheeled into the operating room. They, again, attached all your heart monitors and everything. They attached certain electrodes to watch certain wavelengths of your brain to make sure that if they're around your spinal cord, nothing happens. And the surgeon comes up to me and he just wants, to have one last chat. And he says that he's noticed that one of my vertebrae in my lower back has a crack in it. He doesn't know the extent of it until he actually gets in there. But he wanted my consent to, if need be, fuse it and go further down, which made me very nervous, but I obviously agreed.
Yeah.
And I was put out, and there it was. And I woke up 2 hours later, and I just remember the first thing I asked was, did they have to do more? Because I was just so paranoid.
Yeah.
And she's like, no, surgery was totally fine. You're all good to go. So I had to stay in this like recovery wake up room for a little while, where they made sure the anesthesia wore off and I was a bit more coherent. And then I was wheeled into another room where my mom was, and we were basically hanging out for maybe 2-3 hours. Until they made sure there was no issues, the pain levels were down.
What a drastic change from your last surgery.
I'm still waiting for something to go wrong, because I was just like, oh geez. Like that last one was just horrendous. And then, yeah, my mom and I were out of there within not even 12 hours of surgery.
You had a full spinal surgery in one day.
One day, and I was out walking. Like they wheel you out in a wheelchair, but I was walking with the car. But you're literally walking, and I was like mind blown just how far we've come medically as a society. It's crazy.
So even though your scoliosis has technically been corrected, this is a lifelong journey for you.
Yes, always will be. I'll always have something to work on. I'm in like deep dealings with my physiotherapist, my acupuncturist. I'm constantly visiting with my doctor, just trying to get pain management, because your body does eventually get used, when you've been on them for so many years, get used to pain meds. And they just stop working as great. So it's always been just sort of a constant battle at trying to find the best pain management for me.
Right.
And the fact that I only really have 3 vertebrae, I believe it is, in my lower back that can move on their own. They take all the weight bearing. If I do any kind of twisting, they take it all on. So they wear out a lot faster than most people's bones would. So that's always going to be an issue. Plus muscle imbalances. Because of the curve, certain parts of my body are stronger than the others. Some areas of my back have 0 muscle tone compared to the others. So it's a constant need for adjustments and help. And my physio says basically for me to ever feel even remotely pain-free, I'll never be pain-free, but remotely, I have to be fitter than the average athlete.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's a pretty
It's
crazy thing to be told.
It's a daunting thing, because your whole life is going to have to be based around fitness.
Yeah, absolutely. And you've been working with a trainer.
Yeah, I just started with a trainer, especially because recently my muscle imbalances have started to cause a lot of pain in themselves. But from what I've been told, it's correctable without surgery. You basically just need to get the muscles that have nothing to gain more, and the ones that are in overuse to calm down a bit. So I've been working with a lot of different specialists. I'm still waiting to see a couple specialists so that I can actually talk to someone about pain who actually understands the depth of it.
Right.
As well as a physiatrist to possibly get injections and whatnot.
What kind of injections would it be?
I'm not 100% sure. They just call it what they call a trigger point injection.
Okay.
So I'm assuming like a cortisone or a steroid shot.
Right.
Or something just into the area that is the most inflamed to kind of calm it down a bit.
Okay, so we've reached the end of our podcast today. And if our listeners could take away one thing from this podcast, what should it be?
I would definitely have to say, like, don't judge a book by their cover. Be more empathetic, because someone can look one way and feel totally different. Like, looking at me, you'd never know that I've had 3 spinal surgeries and I deal with pain on a constant daily basis, right? But I am. It's my struggle. And you never know what someone else's struggle is. And just to treat people with kindness, empathy, and understanding.
Well, thank you so much for coming on today, Phoebe.
Yeah, no worries. I had a great time.
Oh, we really appreciate you coming out today.
No worries.
And thank you, everybody, for watching and listening. And we can't wait to see you next episode. Bye.